Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, how are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So, we are just days away from the launch of the Ghoul update, titled The Ghoul Within, and yeah, should be a pretty big overhaul to the nature of Fallout 76, especially for those who want to embrace it. A smaller one for those who wish to remain human, but still, changes coming there as well. And we're going to have a ton of stuff to talk about. So, today, we're going to talk about the AMA Q&A session that a few of the devs did yesterday on Discord. So if you weren't on Discord, you might have missed this one. Basically, they took a bunch of questions over the preceding days and then answered them in what effectively looked like a Zoom conversation, but that kind of deal with a couple of the community managers as well. So I've got the major answers listed here that I'm going to bring to those of you who missed, and we'll sort of work our way through this. There are a couple of questions, unfortunately, I didn't get to because Discord wigged out on me at one stage, so I definitely missed a bit in the middle there. But there were also a couple of sort of repeated points as well, so I've sort of condensed this down into the core points, minus the few that unfortunately I missed due to technical hiccups. But yeah, let's have a little gander at this. So, in no particular order, one of the first things they talked about was the balance of the whole thing. Basically, you've got some things that apply to ghouls, some things that don't apply to ghouls and don't work for ghouls, and vice versa for humans, obviously. And their idea was to make sure that ghouls and humans were roughly equally powered, or had the potential to be so, but in different ways, so they were good at different things, which obviously lines up with the kind of what we know about, obviously, food-based stuff and blood-based stuff like that, not available to ghouls because of the changes in the way those operate, but also are available to humans, so... But then again, you get the radiation and glow and other benefits and the feral stuff from being a ghoul, and humans obviously don't get to draw upon that. So yeah, different styles of play, different strengths and weaknesses was the goal to make sure things stayed balanced. So, they're describing them as races. I think species is perhaps a little bit more up-to-date way of phrasing it, but anyway. The ghoul species is launching as a starting point, and they plan to build on it and refine it over time. So yeah. Essentially, basically, what they're saying there was that the version of the Ghoul that will be launching next week is not the final version, in the sense that neither is the human, you know? The type of gameplay experience we've had since the get-go has evolved and developed, and they've added things and modified things, and they do this all the time as an ongoing process anyway. The same will apply to the Ghoul, is basically what they were saying there. So there were questions around the disguise mechanic. So obviously certain groups, particularly say the Brotherhood of Steel, not big fans of ghouls. So if you want to interact with them, you will need a disguise. And they were talking a bit about this mechanic and how it works. Basically the question was, well, can I just slap a fashion mask on and go into, say, Fort Atlas and be fine? The short answer is no. The disguise system is a very specific thing. In order to use it, you have to go and visit the appropriate NPC at the centre of the ghoul settlement, I suppose. I forget the name of it now, it's been a minute. But there's basically a ghoul settlement here that will be added with this update. So you'll have to head there and meet a character called Jay who will help you disguise yourself so it is not obvious you're a ghoul. The practical elements of this will be that factions who don't like ghouls can't tell that you're a ghoul. It's supposed to be, from a lore standpoint, not just your appearance, but also things like it's the sound of your voice and potentially any smell that might come along with being a ghoul, because, yeah, they might well smell quite a bit. Stuff like that. So the disguise is supposed to be a bit more complicated, and you need the help of this character Jay to put the disguise on, and also to remove the disguise afterwards from the sound of things. So, yeah, that's going to be a whole more involved system for ghouls, rather than just a case of stick a hat on, you know, and a funny mustache or something. Yeah, an interesting point nonetheless. Really cool point for both those who do wish to become ghouls and those who don't as well, if you end up staying human. There will be, coming on down the pipeline in future, new customization options for both humans and ghouls, which is to say appearance options, as in hairstyles, noses and beards and scars and skin textures and things like that. All of these things are completely dynamic for the Ghoul on launch, but there'll be a whole bunch more stuff being added into the game that we'll be able to access going forward at some point. It's an in-development thing. So that's cool. More customization options. We've not had a lot of new stuff added into that area since the game actually launched way back at the end of 2018. There have been a little bit here and there added to that system, but not a lot. So another round of stuff will be very cool. Apparently it's a more involved thing and more demanding on the game as a whole thing than you might think, from what I've heard from devs in the past. So it's quite a big deal in some ways, both from their perspective and, of course, from having new options to further customize our characters. So yeah, very cool. So, legendary effects, in particularly a PvP context, was asked here, which is going to be a very niche question and answer, but there we go. They asked whether or not the Assassin's legendary effect will impact Ghoul players. Short version, nope, they're not human. Assassins gives you a damage buff against human enemies, and that also applies to human characters in PvP. And no, it doesn't work against Ghouls because they are not human anymore. However, they are Ghouls, so the Ghoul Slayer's legendary effect should work. So, there, those who engage in a bit of PvP, there you go. That particular effect is the one you will want for facing off against Ghoul characters. Might require having a specialised weapon for that. On the other hand, yeah, very niche. So, going back to face customization again, when you become a Ghoul, you will need to design a new face from scratch. If you change back to human, however, the game should remember how you looked before you became a Ghoul. So yeah, you will have to go through the whole character creation, face shaping menu effectively when you become a Ghoul, and the starting point will not be where you were before. If you want to try and get back to that, you probably can get something close and then rework it so you look like the same guy or girl but ghoulified. I'd imagine that will be possible, although it will rely on your skill as a face molder in Fallout 76, I suppose. But yeah, if you then subsequently change back to being human, it should switch you back to the state you were in before, the face you had prior to becoming a Ghoul, which is a nice tidbit. I've just remembered something, actually, that I've not included in my list here. They did answer a question regarding the transitions between Ghoul and human, in that somebody raised the question of, is there an atom charge to it? And the answer is kinda. So you transform into a Ghoul, that is free. And if you decide you don't like it, you can transform back to being human once, and that is free. If you then decide to change your mind again after that and become Ghoul for a second time, that's where an atom charge kicks in. They didn't do a very good job in explaining why and how that. They kind of just didn't really answer the question there. It is what it is. But yeah, you can become a Ghoul for free, you can change back to human for free once each, and then after that you will have to pay atoms to engage in that transformation beyond that. So yeah, consider your decision carefully in each direction. Unless you wish to throw money at it, I suppose. So, feral ghouls. This has come up a few times, this particular question, whether or not they will attack Ghoul players. Obviously, in some places in the lore, they don't attack Ghouls. In other places in the wider Fallout universe, Ghouls and ferals will come into conflict. In this case, this is one of the cases where they will come into conflict. The short version is balance. If a whole enemy subset just won't attack you because you're a Ghoul, that's going to create a whole number of issues, and they've just changed the whole balance of the game. And some of the events and group content, stuff like that, also have Ghouls as enemies. So, you know, if you go in there as a Ghoul and your friend doesn't, then they're all going to just pile on that one friend who is human and leave you alone. That's an issue, was the gist of it. So, yeah, in short, feral Ghouls will still attack Ghouls. That being said, there are specific cases being added with the update wherein Ghoul characters will encounter feral Ghouls who will behave differently, whatever that means, towards a Ghoul player. They didn't elaborate on that, giving us the opportunity to find that on out for ourselves, but yeah, there are a few specific occasions where they will react differently. Obviously, throughout the game, characters will respond to you differently as a Ghoul as well, so it should be interesting to see what happens, but yeah, I get the balance issue. Next question was about daily and weekly score challenges, in that certain of them would be problematic as they currently stand for Ghoul players, and they were quite emphatic on saying from the get-go they wanted to make sure that nobody was excluded from content based on their choice here. So in short, they are modifying certain challenges which Ghouls wouldn't ostensibly be able to complete. So for example, completing X thing whilst well-fed, Ghoul can't do that because they can't be well-fed. So I imagine they will drop that challenge altogether from the available list, or possibly have an alternative that pops up if you're a Ghoul. I don't quite know. But they are making sure that you won't lose out because of that, in short. So yeah, there are certain things currently, prior to the update, that Ghouls couldn't complete. That won't be a problem going forward, apparently. They were quite emphatic on that point. Although perhaps not quite excessive in the number of details they shared. Here's a weird one that I don't quite get, though. Food buffs kinda still apply to Ghouls. You don't get benefits from being well-fed or penalties from starving, but you can apparently still get food buffs, I think. The exact explanation wasn't particularly clear, so it's something we might have to experiment with in-game a little bit. But the idea generally was that The feral meter that a ghoul has means that over time you'll get closer and closer and eventually go feral, and apparently the use of chems mitigates this effect if you don't want to go feral. Obviously not everybody's going to want to be chugging chems all the time, so food is apparently usable as an alternative to offset the desire, the ability to go feral, or the feral mechanic. Yeah, it's a little bit of a head scratcher, that one. The explanation's a little bit, I don't quite get it. It seems like it might be a little bit skewed or unbalanced. Maybe that's just me missing something, but yeah, definitely questions around that to be asked, and we'll have to have a look at that in game. But apparently, food buffs do still apply. Related to that feral meter, though, future updates of the game will be adding new ways in which players can manage their feral meter, if they're ghouls, obviously. Currently, if you want to avoid going feral, you take more chems, and if you want to go feral, you take fewer ones and will eventually go feral. In general, bit of an oversimplification, but anyway. But their plan is to add additional ways in which you can manage your feral meter in future updates. So not here in March, but on down the line at some point. The devs were mentioning the concept of a Ghoul Zerker, which would presumably be a character who leans into going feral at sort of at will, more or less, as a berserker approach, which, yeah, this is not something that's going to be the case in the initial launch of the Ghoul. It'll be a subsequent addition, assuming they can make it work. The idea would be that you can then accelerate your transition into a feral state, as opposed to just staving it off. So yeah, that will develop over time, but at launch it's going to be a more simplistic version of it, and they'll sort of figure out what everybody's doing and how they're using them, and add further developments on down the line, which makes sense. As I say, starting point, not an end point really here. Legendary effects. So, species-specific legendary effects are something that is going to happen in the future. So right now, things like the Bloodied legendary effects and Overeaters stuff, I believe it was Overeaters, might have been another one related to food, anyway. They're basically useless legendaries if you're a ghoul at the moment, because you cannot take advantage of them due to your interaction with food, and lowering your health due to radiation and things like that. Makes it relatively ineffective. However, there will be, on down the line, though not at launch, additional legendary effects added into rotation that are specifically geared towards ghouls to kind of offset this. And they're also talking about adding further legendary effects to the pool, giving us other options in future in general anyway, so humans will have new options as well at some point in the future. This is not a set in stone sort of thing, it's something that they're planning but haven't really started doing yet, so in all likelihood we're probably looking at a year or more before something like this actually happens, but they are talking about adding additional legendary effects in that take account of the new species dynamic that is coming with the addition of the Ghoul. Yeah, interesting. Sort of building on a few of these points in general, they're talking about future updates, and this is an open-ended, vague kind of comment, but they're basically saying all future updates will be built to account for the presence of the Ghoul player-type species in the game, which is not terribly surprising. Obviously, ghouls get responded to differently to humans, there's different social interactions, there'll be different RP options for you in the conversation options you can pick, things like that, going into future updates, and probably other factors as well. Obviously, they're not sharing, they haven't even talked to any extent about what's happening as near as June yet, so this is a very, very open-ended comment, but yeah, they wanted to be very clear on the fact that every subsequent update will account for the addition of Ghoul player types into the game, and will factor that in a number of different ways. So the exact nature of that will obviously vary depending on the nature of the update, and be something we'll have to wait and see on, because, well, like I say, they haven't talked about any of these updates other than vague hints that we're getting some changes to the camp building system, particularly the menus, which are getting overhauled, and other bits and pieces. It's been very, very vague beyond the Ghoul, but not so terribly surprising because this is a very, very large tentpole type of update. So yeah, once this is out, we'll start hearing more about the new stuff, I'm sure. So last couple of points that I've got here. So something John Rush mentioned, who's the creative director on 76, the head honcho, or one of the two head honchos I should say, at the moment. He mentioned that they're generally trying to add greater challenge to the game for longer-term players, essentially make it harder, which, for me, as somebody who's saying constantly that Fallout 76 lacks challenge, and it really, really does, this is great. Unfortunately, also for me, who plays as a solo player, this is coming in the form of the raids at the moment. And obviously we've got Gleaming Depths at the moment, and subsequent updates will include more difficult and, both more content that is difficult and content that is more difficult. That's quite a hard one to explain, or phrase anyway. That sort of thing will be coming on down the line. So yeah, more challenges for higher level endgame players coming on down the line that are supposedly even more difficult than what is there currently. The sort of angle that seemed to be implied here was that it will be in a similar vein to raids, so that subsequent raids in new dungeons, essentially, will be more difficult than what's there already. Great if you like being in a group. If you are like me, who is a solo player and has no desire to be anything other than a solo player, that kind of royally sucks because it still pushes us out. So, yeah. What about us lot, guys? Come on. Yeah, I don't play the raids because I have no interest in being in a group. And, yeah, that's that. So, hopefully there'll be a little bit of a pendulum swinging the other way to accommodate people who don't want to group up. But for now, that's, yeah, challenges for players who don't want to be in groups are not looking like they're going to be a thing, which is very disappointing. Obviously, this was very, very tenuous and kind of amorphous in terms of an answer. It really wasn't specific, so because Bethesda really haven't shared details on what's coming further down the line yet. So we'll have to see how this actually pans out. But for me, I suspect this is at least going to be a continuing bone of contention. But we'll see what they have for us. And the last point, again, kind of moving away from the Ghoul a little bit, is a question relating to caravans. To be honest, the answer to this really didn't answer the question that was being asked. The question that was being asked was whether or not this update would have sort of new vendors and stuff coming into the Caravan system at Milepost Zero. And either I missed it or that question just plain didn't get answered. On the other hand, the answer was relevant to a question that I had, and I think a lot of other people do, which was more to do with the current bugs and issues surrounding the Caravan running system. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but particularly for me, if the Brahmin is going around that southwestern corner of the Skyline Drive route, then that area in particular has one spot that the Brahmin just gets stuck and won't progress beyond. So, yeah, I've kind of given up on doing this until such point as they're able to fix it. It seems like probably that won't be this update, which is disappointing to hear. Because apparently they are working on fixes, and they said that there's a number of issues intersecting that are causing the problems, from things like pathing to nav meshing, which apparently not the same thing, and the Brahmin specifically, something to do with the way the Brahmin work, I don't know. But there's a number of different points that are kind of mashing together and causing issues, and that they have yet to smooth out all of the bumps in that yet. They are working on it, and they will obviously let us know and update and fix that when they have a fix for it. But right now, there's no ETA for that, which is definitely disappointing to hear. I would have liked to have seen that in this update, but I mean, he didn't emphatically say that it wasn't in the update, so I guess we'll find out on Tuesday when the patch notes come out, but it does sound like that is going to be unlikely. So there we go. That's the answers to the questions that I pulled out. Obviously, there was a load of back and forth in there, and there was some sort of silly, jokey stuff going on as well, which was, yeah, is what it is. It's the kind of personality and the character that Bethesda have in these things. Yeah, some interesting news, some nice little details in there. Promising updates and stuff for the future, and further development on the Ghoul stuff is always very cool. I do slightly regret the couple of questions that unfortunately I missed due to Discord throwing a wobbler and stopping working on me, but what can you do? Sometimes technology does that, doesn't it? There we go, yeah, interesting. Looking forward to the Ghoul update. I've got a few more videos already planned, and doubtless more to come that are not planned when I find out yet more about the update as well in coming days, so do keep it here if you want to hear important bits of information and news. The update is coming out on Tuesday, so that is the 18th, I think. I've gone and forgotten. Let me quickly check. Tuesday the 18th, yes, of March 2025, so that's the Ghoul update. In all likelihood, it will be 10 AM Eastern Time, and for the servers coming down, which is about 3 PM UK time. That's the usual time they start it. I don't think they've officially given us a start time for maintenance yet. It'll probably come out a bit closer to the time. But that's the normal frame they go on. As for how long the maintenance will last, how long is a piece of string? It'll last as long as it takes, basically, which is always the way. So yeah, we'll get to check out some patch notes, bits and pieces like that nearer the time, and I've got some other bits and pieces to talk about between now and then. So, as I say, if you want a bit more information about the Ghoul update, I've got previous videos I'll make sure to link, and other things to talk about coming forward as well. So, likes, subs, notification bell, all that good stuff. If you haven't already, I really appreciate. Social media links in the description if you want to hit those out and support me over there. And of course, channel memberships if you want to support the channel. I really, really appreciate that. Massively helps out. So huge thanks to everybody who's done that. If you get the chance as well, of course, we are streaming Fallout 76, and we've got a whole bunch of other cool stuff coming up. We are playing Avowed, which is really, really cool, having a great time with that, and Atomfall is less than 2 weeks away as well, and I cannot wait to dive into that. So lots happening on the streaming front very, very soon as well, so do join us for that if you get a chance. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.